How's it going, suborna? So today we're going to be explaining the chatbot functionality. So as you see here, this is the chatbot.js where we're able to call our Flask backend. So that is going to call the app.py. And the app.py right here receives through the method of post for slash chatbot coming from the front end. We're going to use the function handle query to basically we're going to receive our response. The data is going to be the request.json. Then we're going to take we're going to make our query equal to the data, and then we're going to transform that query into a response using the handle query, which is in the llm.py file. So moving to the llm.py file, let's see what actually happens to our message. Right here on the top, we have some function definitions. So this one is for Elasticsearch. This is just our function for looking up within our Elastic database. This is our updating the fauna database function, just updates fauna with new information, although this function is not being used right now, for the time being right now. But let's get into what actually the program does. So this is using the OpenAI Assistant API. So this doesn't work like the normal use of the OpenAI. Like down here, I'm using the function like normally. Like this is not an assistant. This is just a normal call to the OpenAI API. This is a so let me explain it. Sorry, I'm getting a little mixed up. So here we have the assistant's instructions. This is what the assistant does. How the assistant is supposed to use each one of its function tools based on what the user wants. So here we have our definition handle query, which we saw in the Flask app. So our query comes through here. Then it tries to create a new thread, which obviously I'm guessing you're probably going to have this code outside of this function, considering the threads need to be generated per new message session. So then we have this code right here, which just checks if we're receiving the OpenAI answer yet or not. So we're just constantly checking every 5 seconds to see if the OpenAI message has completed. And if it has completed, then we're sending it back to the front and we're parsing through it. I'm not sure if this implementation is correct because the response content does get deleted. But anyways, if it's not completed or if it says requires action, then we're gonna go into right here. It's going to put all of the functions it needs to run that the assistant has determined that we need to run based on the user's query. So if the user is saying like, hey, I'm looking for a Logitech mouse, it's going to respond with requires action, and it's going to put on the tools output, it's going to put Elasticsearch. Because how do we know that? So actually, sorry, it's not on the tools output. Tools output is just where we put our answer. It's for action and requires action, function name equals action.function.name. So this is where we're actually keeping track of all the functions that we're going to run. Right now we only have 3. So these 3 functions get used. So whatever it says on the requires action, if it says Elasticsearch, then it's going to use Elasticsearch. And it's to use Elasticsearch, well, as we saw before, here on the tools dot, I have a folder called tools. Let's look. My tools.py will define how to use that search. So description, Elasticsearch, query the Elasticsearch database to retrieve product information. And it's going to tell the type, it's an object, with the search query being a string. The description, it's the search term to look up an Elasticsearch database. And so, yeah, based on those results, we want to append those to the chatbot knowledge message requests, basically, to make sure the chatbot understands the context and is able to present the results based on the retrieval augmentation that you have just done. So sometimes if Elasticsearch, so what the chatbot is instructed is if Elasticsearch doesn't return anything, it'll then go to DuckDuckGo search. Well, it will do an internet search over the information that the user query requested. And then this function right here, generate questions and suggestions, this function is not complete yet. At least let me explain what it does. So right now what this does is it so when the user doesn't give us a really vague search query, like let's say the user gives us birthday present for my daughter, right? Not something that's not a specific product search. So then what we're going to do is we're going to use the ChatGPT. We're basically going to make a separate tool using ChatGPT. So this is ChatGPT 4. Preview, 1106 preview for the assistant. But the assistant has the ability to call functions, which we'll see down here, that use other models as well. So continuing to following the logic here. So when we summon these three functions, we're either handling the handle Elasticsearch lookup, handle DuckDuckGo search, or handle generate questions and suggestions. It's just a way of formatting our function outputs. So right here we have our handlers functions. And like I said, all they're doing is calling the original function. So handle Elasticsearch calls Elasticsearch. And it's just a way of setting like an intermediary between the actual function and the assistant's input and output. So these are just handlers. The handle generate questions and suggestions, as you can see, will generate questions with suggestions. So in order to do this, you're going to summon the function generate questions and suggestions, which all this does is it generates the questions based on the user query. So right here, so we have our handle generate questions and suggestions. This calls generate questions and suggestions. Generate questions and suggestions calls generate questions first. So the query, we pass it in the prompt. We tell it max questions equals 5. So now we're going to tell our GPT 3.5 here, generate 5 questions related to this user product, right? That the user prompt, like birthday present for my daughter. So this is going to generate some questions like, what kind of birthday presents does your daughter like? How old is your daughter? Just stuff that would be relevant to determining the parameters for the product that we want to find. And then, so we generate those questions. And then for question in questions, we're going to append a suggestion or a list of suggestions to that question specifically. So we're taking each one of the questions we generated, and then we're basically generating some suggestions so that the user doesn't have to explicitly write the answer. We can generate suggestions which are going to be buttons for the user to click on. What I mean by this is if like, if I type in, let me give you an example. Like if I type in daughter present, and then the questions that are generated are how old your daughter, then the suggestions generated would be like 10, 12, or 14. And then the user can either click on one of these, and then when the user clicks on one of these buttons, which is one of the suggestions, on their input text box, type here, is going to now read that suggestion that they clicked, whatever it is that they clicked on. And so when the user, say none of these is the user's daughter's age, and they could edit it themselves to 11 or 13. These are just suggestion buttons, but they still technically need a type and send their answer back to the chatbot. So there's obviously something wrong with the function code here, because if you can fix the suborna, I would actually pay you extra to fix this. But right now, all these functions do is send these questions back to the chatbot. So this just gets sent back as the answer to my chatbot. Instead, what this needs to do is send these questions and suggestions to the front end, have the front end user click the choices that they want, and then send them. And then when they click send, then the chatbot receives the answer back. So basically, instead of sending these questions and suggestions straight to the chatbot, which the chatbot doesn't know what to do with them because they're just a list of questions and suggestions. I mean, the chatbot can sometimes write its own. What usually the chatbot does is it writes its own questions and suggestions based on the input from these functions. I'm trying to think. So yeah, that's basically all the chatbot does right now. It just it's an assistant listening anytime the user gives it a query that the assistant determines that it would need one of the functions to answer that user query. Then it go ahead and executes. The handle query are just the intermediary, and then the functions under it are what actually is getting executed. Sorry, that was my cat. Anyways, that's pretty much all I've got to talk about. If you have any other questions or if I need to elaborate more, let me know so I can record you another video.